Again, Yeshua began to teach by the lake, but the crowd that gathered around him was so large that he got into the boat on the lake and sat there, while the crowd remained on shore at the water's edge. He taught them many things in parables. In the course of the teaching, he said to them, "Listen, a farmer went out to sow his seed. As he sowed, some seed fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Other seed fell on rocky patches where there was not much soil. It sprouted quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun rose, the young plants were scorched, and since their roots were not deep, they dried up. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked it, so that it yielded no grain. But other seed fell into rich soil and produced grain. It sprouted and grew and yielded a crop, 30, 60, and even 100 times what it was sown." And he concluded, Whoever has ears, let him hear. Whoever has ears to hear with, let him hear." When Yeshua was alone, the people around him with the 12 asked him about the parables. He answered them, "To you the secret of the kingdom of God has been given, but to those outside everything is in parables, so that they may always be looking but never seeing, always listening but never understand. Otherwise, they might turn and be forgiven." Then Yeshua said to them, "Don't you understand this parable? How will you be able to understand any parable? The sower sows the message. Those along the path where the message is sown are people who no sooner hear it than the adversary comes and takes away the message sown in them. Likewise, those receiving seed on rocky patches are people who hear the message and joyfully accept it at once. But they have no root in themselves, so they hold out for a while. But as soon as some trouble or persecution arises on account of the message, they immediately fall away. Others are those sown among the thorns. They hear the message, but the worries of the world, the deceitful glamour of wealth, and all the other kinds of desires push in and choke the message so that it produces nothing. But those sown on rich soil hear the message, accept it, and bear fruit 30, 60, and 100-fold. He said to them, "A lamp isn't brought in to be put under a bowl or under the bed, is it? Wouldn't you put it on a lampstand? Indeed, nothing is hidden except to be disclosed, and nothing is covered up except to come out into the open. Those who have ears, let them hear with. Those who have ears to hear with, let them hear." He also said to them, "Pay attention to what you are hearing. The measure with which you measure out will be used to measure to you, and more besides. For anyone who has something will be given more, but from anyone who has nothing, even what he does have will be taken away." And he said, "The kingdom of God is like a man who scatters seed on the ground. Nights he sleeps, days he's awake, and meanwhile the seeds sprout and grow. How? He doesn't know. By itself, the soil produces a crop, first the stalk, then the head, finally the full grain in the head. But as soon as the crop is ready, the man comes with his sickle, because it's harvest time." Yeshua also said, "With what can we compare the kingdom of God? What illustration should be used to describe it? It is like a mustard seed, which, when planted, is the smallest of all the seeds in the field, but after it has been planted, it grows and becomes the largest of all plants, with such big branches that birds flying about can build nests in its shade." With many parables like these, he spoke the message to them, to the extent that they were capable of hearing it. He did not say a thing to them without using a parable. When he was alone with his own Talmudim, he explained everything to them. That day, when evening had come, Yeshua said to them, "Let's cross to the other side of the lake." So leaving the crowd behind, they took him just as he was in the boat, and there were other boats with him. A furious windstorm arose, and the waves broke over the boat, so that it was close to being swamped. But he was in the stern on a cushion asleep. They woke him and said to him, "Rabbi, doesn't it matter to you that we're about to be killed?" He awoke, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." The wind subsided, and there was a dead calm. He said to them, "Why are you afraid? Have you no trust even now?" But they were terrified and asked each other, "Who can this be, that even the wind and the waves obey him?" Yeshua and his Talmudim arrived at the other side of the lake in the Gerasenes territory. As soon as he disembarked, a man with an unclean spirit came out in burial caves to meet him. He lived in the burial caves, and no one could keep him tied up, not even with a chain. He had often been chained hand and foot, but he would snap the chains and break the irons off his feet, and no one was strong enough to control him. Night and day he wandered among the graves and through the hills, howling and gnashing himself with stones. Seeing Yeshua from a distance, he ran, fell on his knees in front of him, and screamed at the top of his voice, "What do you want to do with me, Yeshua, Son of God, Ha'elyon? I implore you, in God's name, don't torture me." For Yeshua had already begun saying to him, "Unclean spirit, come out of this man." Yeshua asked him, "What's your name?" "My name is Legion," he answered. "There are so many of us." And he kept begging Yeshua not to send him out of the region. Now there were a large herd of pigs feeding near the hill. The unclean spirits begged him, "Send us to the pigs so we can go into them." Yeshua gave them permission. They came out and entered the pigs, and the herd, numbering around 2,000, rushed down the hillside into the lake and were drowned. The swineherds fled and told in the town and in the surrounding country, and the people went to see what had happened. They came to Yeshua and saw the man who had the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were frightened. Those who had seen it told what had happened to the man controlled by demons into the pigs. And the people began begging Yeshua to leave their district. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been demonized begged him to allow him to go with him. But Yeshua would not permit it. Instead, he said to him, "Go home to your people and tell them how much Adonai, in his mercy, has done for you." He went off and began proclaiming to the 10 towns how much Yeshua had done for him, and everyone was amazed. Yeshua crossed in the boat to the other side of the lake, and a great crowd gathered around him. There came to him a synagogue officer, Yair by name, who fell at his feet and pleaded desperately with him. "My little daughter is at the point of death. Please come and lay your hands on her so that she will get well and live." He went with him, and a large crowd followed, pressing all around him. Among them was a woman who had a hemorrhage for 12 years and had suffered a great deal under many physicians. She had spent her life savings, yet instead of improving, she had grown worse. She had heard about Yeshua, so she came behind him in the crowd and touched his robe. For she said, "If I touch even his clothes, I will be healed." Instantly, hemorrhaging stopped, and she felt in her body that she had been healed from the disease. At the same time, Yeshua, aware that power had gone out from him, turned around and asked the crowd, "Who touched my clothes?" His Talmudim responded, "You see the people pressing on you, and you still ask, 'Who touched me?'" But he kept looking around to see who had done it. The woman, frightened and trembled because she knew what had happened to her, came and fell down in front of him and told him the whole truth. "Daughter," he said to her, "your trust has healed you. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." While he was still speaking, people from the synagogue's official's house came, saying, "Your daughter has died. Why bother the rabbi any longer?" Ignoring what they said, Yeshua told the synagogue officer, "Don't be afraid. Just keep trusting." He let no one follow him except Kepha, Yaakov, and Yochanan, Yaakov's brother. When they came to the synagogue's official's house, he found a great commotion, with people weeping and wailing loudly. On entering, he said to them, "Why all this commotion and weeping? The child isn't dead. She's asleep." And they jeered at him. But we put them all outside, took the child's father and mother and those with him, and went in where the girl was. Taking her by the hand, he said to her, "Talita kumi, which means little girl, I say to you, get up. At once the girl got up and began walking. She was 12 years old. Everybody was utterly amazed. He gave them strict orders to say nothing about this to anyone and told them to give her something to eat. When Yeshua left and went to his hometown, and his Talmudim followed him, on Shabbat, he started to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astounded. They asked, "Where did this man get all this? What is this wisdom he has been given? What are these miracles worked through him? Isn't he just the carpenter, the son of Miriam, the brother of Yaakov and Yossi and Yehuda and Shimon? Aren't his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. But Yeshua said to them, "The only place people don't respect a prophet is in his hometown, among his own relatives, in his own house." So he would do no more miracles other than lay on hands and a few sick people heal them. And he was amazed at their lack of trust. Then he went through their surrounding towns and villages teaching. Yeshua summoned the 12 and started sending them out in pairs, giving them authority over the unclean spirits. He instructed them, "Take nothing for your trip except a walking stick. No bread, no pack, no money in your belt. Wear shoes, but not an extra shirt. Whenever you enter a house, stay there until you leave the place. And if the people of some place will not welcome you, they refuse to hear you, then as you leave, shake the dust off your feet as a warning to them." So they set out, preached that the people should turn from sin to God. They expelled many demons, and they anointed many sick people with oil and healed them. Meanwhile, King Herod heard about this, for Yeshua's reputation had spread. Some were saying, "Yochanan the Immerser has been raised from the dead. That is why these miraculous powers are at work in him." Others said, "It's Eliyahu," and still others, "He is a prophet, like one of the old prophets." But when Herod heard about it, he said, "Yochanan, whom I beheaded, has been raised." For Herod had sent and had Yochanan arrested and chained him in prison because of the Herodias, the wife of his brother Philip. Herod had married her. But Yochanan had told him, "It violates Torah for you to marry your brother's wife." So Herodias had a grudge against him and wanted to put him to death. But this she could not accomplish, because Herod stood in awe of Yochanan and protected him. For he knew that he was a Zaddik, a holy man. Whenever he heard him, he became deeply disturbed, yet he liked to listen to him. Finally, the opportunity came. Herod gave a banquet on his birthday for his nobles and officers and leading men of the Gilgal. The daughter of Herodias came in and danced, and she pleased Herod and her guests. The king said to the girl, "Ask me whatever you want, and I will give it to you." And he made a vow to her, "Whatever you ask me, I will give you up to half my kingdom." So she went out and said to her mother, "What should I ask for?" She said, "The head of Yochanan the Immerser." At once the daughter hurried back to the king and announced her request. "I want you to give me right now on a platter the head of Yochanan the Immerser." Herod was appalled, but out of regard for the oaths he had sworn before his dinner guest, he did not want to break his word to her. So the king immediately sent a soldier with his personal guard with orders to bring Yochanan's head. The soldier went and beheaded Yochanan in prison, brought his head on a platter, and gave it to the girl. The girl gave it to her mother. When Yochanan's Talmudim heard of it, they came and took the body and laid it in a grave. Those who had been sent out rejoined Yeshua and reported to him that they had all that they had done and taught. There were so many people coming and going that they couldn't even take the time to eat. And he said to them, Come with me by yourselves to a place where we can be alone and can get some rest." They went off by themselves to an isolated spot. But many people, seeing them leave and recognized them, ran ahead on foot from all the towns and got there first. When Yeshua came ashore, he saw a huge crowd. Filled with compassion for them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd, he began teaching them many things. By this time, the hour was late. The Talmudim came to him and said, "This is a remote place, and it's getting late. Send the people away so that they can go and buy food for themselves in the farms and towns around here." But he answered them, "Give them something to eat yourselves." They replied, "We are to go and spend thousands on bread and give them something to eat?" He asked them, "How many loaves do you have? Go and check." When they found out that they had 5 and 2 fish, then he ordered all the people to sit down in groups on the green grass. They sat down in groups of 50 and 100, and he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up toward heaven, made bracha. Next, he broke up the loaves and began giving them to the Talmudim to distribute. He also divided up the 2 fish among them all. They ate as much as they wanted, and they took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces of fish. Those who ate the loaves numbered 5,000 men. Immediately, Yeshua had his Talmudim get in the boat and go on ahead of him toward the other town of the lake, toward Beit Zedah, while he sent the crowds away. After he had left them, he went into the hills to pray. When night came, the boat was out on the lake, and he was by himself on land. He saw that they were having difficulty rowing because the wind was against them. So at an hour of 4 o'clock in the morning, he came toward them walking on the lake. He meant to come alongside them, but when they saw him walking on the lake, they thought it was a ghost and let out a shriek, for they had all seen him and were terrified. However, he spoke to them. "Courage," he said. "It is I. Stop being afraid." He got into the boat with them, and the wind ceased. They were completely astounded, for they did not understand about the loaves. On the contrary, their hearts had been made stone-like. After they had made the crossing, they landed at Gennesaret and anchored. As soon as they got out of the boat, the people recognized him and began running around throughout the whole region and bringing sick people on their stretchers to any place where they heard he was. Wherever he went, in towns, cities, or country, they laid the sick in the marketplaces. They begged him to let them touch even his tzitzit on his robe. All who were touched were healed.